And we switch now to Ellis Island. Okay, to Ellis Island. That's the next scene. We have actually Teddy Roosevelt on his yacht racing, right, from Long Island to Ellis Island to put the reins on his own appointee as Commissioner General, William Williams, another patrician reformer, but a Gentile. Williams is enforcing the progressives' immigration law, the laws that Oscar Strauss, the first Jewish cabinet member, Roosevelt's appointee, who presides over the Immigration Bureau and who has to feed Roosevelt a steady stream of speeches defending a policy of openness to the races of Southern and Eastern Europe in the face of a clamor in Congress to enact kind of essentially restrictionist legislation aimed at excluding the new immigrants. In the sort of the solution, the time was a literacy test, which wrongly was thought, well, a literacy test first in English, which would have excluded most of them, or even a literacy test in their own language, which was thought to exclude them. Anyway, there were all kinds of demands for restrictions that were racially intended and marked and were meant to stem these tides. And so what was the solution? You had to have something. You couldn't just say they're welcome, because Roosevelt, for all that he's famous as a kind of racial warrior and a champion of racial hierarchies, was a great racial mixer and racial crosser when it came to the new immigrants. He understood the future of American politics belonged to those who could harness the votes and energies of the new immigrants. He strode through the Lower East Side, supporting strikers, even when they were Turkish Jews who didn't even know Yiddish. All the Jews were part of his new America, right? Even as he insisted on the white man's burden elsewhere. So Roosevelt needed laws, and what were the laws? They were laws that rested on the individual's fitness and not his or her race or creed. So the laws that he expanded and invigorated were laws that said, if you're going to be a pauper, you're not welcome here. If you're mentally or physically infirm, you're not welcome here. And most critically for our purposes, if you've come under contract or assisted, if you're an assisted immigrant, not a freestanding voluntary one, was the discourse, a kind of classic liberal discourse brought into service for these bureaucratic categories that would begin to sift out a lot of people, but not on racial grounds, right? And in the image was that the freestanding voluntary immigrant would make his or her way, his way, the woman's are another story also for another day. But the idea was we should let in the people who show some promise of being not cheapening the labor market as much assisted immigrant might do, right? Okay, but then comes William Williams and starts to really enforce these laws. They are very open-textured laws. Williams is charged by Roosevelt to show that these laws will do some work. The problem is that just as Williams gets to Ellis Island, and Roosevelt is on, remember we had left him on his schooner kind of hurtling there with the New York Times reporter to stop this, because meanwhile, the pogroms have begun. The Kishinev massacre has sent just all these poor, infirm, right, Jews who don't make the cut if you start saying they can't be assisted, because they're all assisted, right? None of them have saved the money and had the wherewithal to come on their own. And not all of them had their passage paid for by relatives legally responsible for them. And this was the cut that Williams was enforcing. If you're just here because some Jewish charity, right, Baron de Hirsch has sent you over here, we're going to send you back, right? And here Simon Wolf tries to work very far behind the scenes. Max Kohler in a more adversarial role, and then some new immigrant Jewish lawyers are organizing mass demonstrations, saying that William Williams's Ellis Island is like Russia itself. Right, so that there are hundreds of articles in the Yiddish press which Williams, another one of these very brilliant patricians, can read in Yiddish. So you find in the archives Williams's translations of, and I can't read Yiddish, so I'm dependent on Williams's translations of these article after article, calling him a Cossack and using a whip. This is sort of so this comes to a head, and Williams is fired. Williams is fired. Jacob Schiff and sort of the kind of elite bankers and Kohler and Wolff prevail on Roosevelt to just push Williams out the door, right? And then, with World Enough of Time, we would have one more scene. We would go from New York to Texas, right? I teach at Texas, and at Galveston, Texas, right? Jacob Schiff, right? And the Rothschilds in Europe have the idea that and Oscar Strauss and Theodore Roosevelt all agree the solution to the Jewish problem, at least the Jewish problem, and it will become the prototype for the solution to the immigration problem writ large, is not to shut the gate, but to distribute them into the hinterlands. And so the distribution idea, which Roosevelt promotes at every opportunity, they're a cancer, all these kind of organic metaphors. They're congested, they're a disease in the cities of the East Coast, but they will be a necessary leavening in the unpopulated West, right? And Schiff, it recruits Israel Zangwill, author of The Melting Pot, who is himself a Zionist, but getting nowhere with finding a homeland, right? He's said, all right, Palestine is for the time being unavailable, Uganda will do. Then the Brits withdraw, bail on him on Uganda, and so the third best solution is Galveston. The only problem with Galveston, right, is that Schiff is saying you can't form a Jewish colony. He's saying there must be space somewhere in the U.S. hinterland to just form Jewish colonies. No. We're going to send them one by one or two by two to communities all over there. No mahals, no rabbis. You can't send me mahals. You can't send me rabbis. You can't send me old people. Just fit young Jews. And so the tension, and so the interesting tension between Zangwill, who is at once the author of the leading popular text, A Brief for Assimilation, which he explains in an afterword. He was written in the thick of doing this work for the Jewish territorial, it's sort of the deterritorialization of the Jewish territorial movement, which he leads. So Schiff co-opts Zangwill, the kind of frustrated Zionist, into this project of distributing and diffusing the Jews, and quite openly trying to divert them from their Zionism, which he abhors. Right? And Zangwill, who is himself a Zionist, but a kind of sort of great emblem of all these tensions in American or Anglo-American Jewry, because he's at once a Zionist who wants a Jewish homeland, and himself married to a Gentile, and the author of this great dramatization of America as the melting pot. So Zangwill leads the enterprise. Zangwill acquiesces to Schiff. They send them to Galveston, encouraged by Oscar Strauss, encouraged by Roosevelt, only to bump up against the very categories of classical liberal policy, in the sense that this is all assisted immigration. This is all unlawful, notwithstanding its state sponsorship, in virtue of the categories that they had championed as the sort of classic alternative, a kind of race-neutral alternative to the. So that is the sort of tragedy and triumph of this generation of German Jewish advocates on behalf of the new Jewish immigrants. Thank you.